So we're going to commence our service with the singing of Ma Tovu. This will be a different melody. I love this melody. You'll catch on to it. It's a very, but we do the whole Ma Tovu. That's on page 192. As we all know, Ma Tovu halacha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your tabernacle, O Israel. That comes from the Torah. But some of the other verses that are in here come from Psalms. What happens in our liturgy, just so you have a sort of framework, is the liturgy is really a reading of the Torah in many respects. Yes, people added, words and added ideas to the liturgy, but much of the liturgy is drawn directly from the Tanakh, or just incorporated. For example, the second verse, Ve'ani barov chastecha, the third line, that's drawn from Psalms. So, and you can see the footnotes here. So it really happens in Friday night as well, that we're really reading the Torah. We're really reading the Tanakh is how services are basically constructed. So we're going to begin with Ma Tovu, and that is on 109. Again, can you all hear me back there? Good, okay. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Va'ani barov chastecha avo veitecha eshtachave lecha kodshecha v'yiratecha. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Adonai afti me'on metecha u'mekom mishkan kivodecha v'ani ashtachave v'yechla evrecha lifni Adonai osi. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim berov chastecha Aneni b'emet yishecha Aneni b'emet yishecha. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Mishkenotecha Yisrael. And we're going to continue now on page 196. With the prayer, my God, the soul you have given me is pure. Together, my God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God, and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch atah Adonai, asher b'yado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol basar ish. We're going to continue now on page 218. We're going to learn a round. Oh, Maggie, I got it. So part of a traditional Shabbat morning service is something called Psuke de Zimra. Maybe some of you may be familiar with that term. It's introductory psalms that are read. The idea of psalms is to warm the heart, to get us in touch with those things that are really important in life. For example, in one of the psalms it says, "Oh God, teach us to number our days." In other words, that we are finite creatures, right? So that we may attain a heart of wisdom. In other words, that we spend our time wisely and that we do things that really nurture our soul and nurture the human spirit. And we don't spend our time pursuing things as much that are not as significant. So part of prayer is to kind of warm us. We're not going to go through the entire Psuke de Zimra, but what we're going to do is we're going to read we're going to chant the very last passage in the book of Psalms. It's Kol HaNeshama. We can even do this as a round, and that's on page 218. If you look either in the last two lines of the transliteration or in the last two lines of the Hebrew, you'll see. And we're going to try to do this as a round, okay? The melody is very simple. Again, you'll catch on if you can sing Matovu, like I heard, this will not be a challenge. But this is the very last book, the very last verse in the book of Psalms, which is from the third book of the Tanakh, which is Ketuvim. So what we're doing is we're reading passages from the Torah, from the first 5 books of Moses. Here we're reading many, many passages from the book of Ketuvim, which includes Psalms and Proverbs and things. So this is the very last thing. Every living soul praises God. Hallelujah. Praise be God. That's how the book of Psalms ends. So the melody goes like this, and we're going to do it as a round. We'll have Molly take that side, and we'll take. But first we have to learn. It goes like this. Call. That's too low. So too low. We didn't have time to really work out.
I told him choose a key, and we'll just go with it. Ali thinks it really hard.
Kol hanishama tehallel. Hallelujah. Is that too low? Is that okay? Is that a good pitch for everybody?
I'm not on that side.
What's that?
It's fine for me, but I'm sitting over here.
Yeah, okay, right. Well, everybody's going to learn it, and then we'll go from there, okay? Together. Is it too low? I can make it higher. Kol hanishama tehallel. Hallelujah. Again. Kol hanishama tehallel. Hallelujah. Kick it down one.
Yeah, I'll get a little peek into
I think you all
now.
sound really good. You sound wonderful. So now we're going to do it as a prayer. I'm going to take this side. Okay. So this side follows my lead, and then Molly knows to join them. This is not complicated. For me, it's complicated. Kol hanishama tehallel. Hallelujah. Kol hanishama tehallel. Hallelujah. Kol hanishama tehallel. Hallelujah. Again. Shabbat, hallelujah, hallelujah. One more time. Oh, neshama, hallelujah, hallelujah,
It's been a while since we've done, choral singing. Year and a half, guys.
Sounds wonderful. We're going to continue now with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 224, followed by the Baruch. We're going to do the one we did last night. Again, the more you hear it, the more you'll get familiar with it. And maybe next week I'll post the melodies online for people that want to kind of hear that. So. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba b'yama divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'b'yamechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Bagalau v'zman kariv v'yimeru amen. Yesh me'raba me'varach ve'olam u'yameh e'omayam. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalach shemei dekudisha v'richu le'ela min kol bechata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Da'amiram yama v'imru Amen Lai, 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 lai Lai, 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 lai Lai, You may be seated. Let us turn now to page 200 and page 231. Love your neighbor as yourself. Together, love your neighbor as yourself, you said, and light blinded we saw that inner and outer worlds are one as you are one. You spoke and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us as we climbed, fell back, and climbed again. Your Sinai of life, Baruch atah Adonai, habocher bi'amo Yisrael b'yahava. Please rise for the chanting of the Shema, followed by the V'ahavta. Excuse me.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai
May be seated. We continue with the V'ahavta on page 234. Asher Anochi Mitzavacha Tabam B'Beitecha B'Dehek U'V'Shoftecha U'V'Kumecha B'Neinecha Tishkenu V'asitem Kol Mitzvotai Elohechem Elohechem Yethem Yot Lachem Elohim Adonai Elohechem. And we continue now on page 241. At the very top of the page, the good in us will win, page 241. The good in us will win over all the wickedness, over all the wrongs we have done. We will look back at the pages of written history and be amazed and then we will laugh and sing, and the good that is in us, children in their cradles will have won. Our hearts bear with certainty that there is a day and an hour and a mountain called Zion, and that all of the sufferings will gather there and become song, ringing out into every corner of the earth from end to end, and the nations will hear it, and like the caravans in the desert, will all morning throng. We continue now with the Micha Mocha on page 240.
It's an old familiar tune. The three ones. So we have the Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha, Nora tequila, oh say Nora tequila, oh say
Sur Yisrael, Kuma Biazrat Yisrael, Ufdeichenu Mecha Yehuda Yisrael, Go Aleinu Adonai Tzevaot, Shemo Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch Ata Adonai, Baal Yisrael. Please rise for the Tefillah, the Amidah that begins on page 242, and then we'll continue through to page 246, followed by the Kedusha on page 248.
Adonai sevatayimta uviya gitagimateta. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Baruch atah Adonai, Magid Abraham, Mitzrat Sarah. Atah Yipoel Adonai, V'chayei HaKodah, V'chayei Hoshiva, Mekayei Hayit, Mekayei Tzed, Mekayei HaKol V'rachamim Rabim, Somer Noflim V'rofei Kolim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayei Le'emunato, V'shenei Avar, Micha Mocha Bar Yevurot, Melech Levi, Umechayeh, Umasli Baruch atah Adonai, Nehayeh HaKol.
Page 248. Mekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, Yishem Shemadishim Oto B'Shleim Hakatuv al Yad Nevi'echa, V'Dvarav Zeh V'Yamar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, V'Elohim ha'aretz K'vodo. Adir, Adirenu Adonai, Adonenu Adir Shemcha V'Ol ha'aretz, Baruch K'vod Adonai Mikamo. Echad hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu hu Malkeinu, hu Moshiach hu Yashirenu, V'Bachar B'nei Kochai. Ani Adonai Yiloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitzidon, L'dor v'dor. Alleluia. L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor nagidon lecha, L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor nagidon lecha, U'lenetzach netzachim, U'lenetzach netzachim, Kedushat anadish. U'lenetzach netzachim, U'lenetzach netzachim, Kedushat anadish. L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor nagidon lecha, L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor, L'dor v'dor nagidon lecha. V'shivcha Eloheinu Midinu lo yamush le'olam moed. V'shivcha Eloheinu Midinu lo yamush le'olam moed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu HaKadosh. And we continue silently, page 248 to page 260, or in your own personal prayer. If it's your custom to stand while reciting the silent Amidah, of course. And if it's your custom to be seated and reflect on prayer, of course you may do so. Our service continues now with the Oseh Shalom on page 260.
Oseh Shalom, Hallelujah, Oseh Shalom, Hallelujah. Israel, Ve'imenu,
Amen.
Oseh Shalom, Hallelujah, Oseh Shalom,
Aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yakov Yisrael Ve'imenu. Amen. We're going to continue now with the Torah service. We're going to take the Torah out. We're going to chant from the Torah. We'll have a group aliyah for this time, just for trying to get used to the timing of everything. So instead of having maybe 3 people be called separately, we'll do a group aliyah. We'll also take the Torah out, and we'll have an opportunity, of course, to kiss the Torah. We'll bring the Torah down and then bring it back up for the reading. We're going to continue now. We're going to go right to the Shema in the interest of our total program. And we'll start on the top of page 366. Could I have a volunteer to open the ark? Anyone? Sure, please, Mary. Thank you. Thank you. Please rise. We begin with Baruch Shenatan. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedusha.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai iti, U'Ramon B'man Shemo Yachdav. Adonai Ha'netzuvah, Ha'netzuvah, Ha'tiferet, Ha'netzach, Ha'avod. Ki ho b'shamayim u'va'aretz, ki ho b'shamayim u'va'aretz, lecha Adonai ha'mamlacha, yamit na'aseh lechol rosh. You may be seated. So if you want to follow the reading of the Torah, you may follow it on page 1237.
In the red book, if you have the red book.
I think the Plout is this, I think the Plout numbering is pretty much the same. It's this big book. You don't really need it. We're just going to chant 8 verses. By the time you go get the book and come back, it would be, we're just trying to get a sense of the service today. If you'd like a longer Torah reading, we can certainly accommodate that. But right now, we just have like one Aliyah, and we'll just see how we do with that. How's that sound? Good. We're going to conclude the book of Bamidbar, just a very, very brief introduction, famous last words. Basically what happens at the very, very end, and we're going to study this in more detail. Some of you may recall the incident involving the daughters of Salaf Khan, where they were very concerned because their father had passed away and they had no brothers, and women at that time could not inherit land. And so they were concerned that when they went into the land of Israel, they would have no inheritance. There was a gap in the law. Now, what you have to keep in mind, and we'll talk more about that, it's not so much what the law turned out to be. What's interesting is that there's a theory, a rabbinic theory, that all the laws and all the commandments were given by God to Moses at Mount Sinai. So therefore, that problem should have been apparent in the Torah. Right? There should have been, if you read, for example, right after the Sinai, you have a bunch of laws called Mishpatim, about 126 different commandments. You would think that that would be there since God gave the entire Torah. So there is this gap in the law. And there has to be some remedy for that. And Moses doesn't really know what to do because the law is the law as he understood it and as it was written down. Again, this is just looking at it from a literary standpoint. We're not talking about, gee, did this really happen? Did this not really happen? The Torah is really our guide, and its teachings are sometimes hidden to us. Maimonides talks about that this Torah is really like lattice work. It's lattice work. You can't see the real Torah that lies behind. You have to read this to get what's really behind the Torah, which of course opens up the possibility of endless interpretation. So he said, well, you can make the Torah say anything you want. If that's your approach, if you're just reading it as symbolic language, you can make the Torah say anything. It doesn't really matter. But what Maimonides, but if you think about it for a second, if God is eternal, right? That God's teachings are eternal, from the rabbinic standpoint, from the traditional standpoint, then its teachings are eternal. They're not fixed in time. They're beyond time and space, and it's for us to discover what is hidden behind the Torah. So that's sort of the idea of the daughter, and we'll talk more about that. In the interest of time, we're going to begin the reading of the Torah. Quite sure how this book works. Right, it's on, for those who are following, this is Matot, should be Maseh. It's 37 right now. We'll begin on verse 8, which is page 1247. The problem with this book is it opens from left to right. They make it complicated. They try to make it uncomplicated, and in doing so, it makes it complicated. This book opens like an English book, but you have the Hebrew, so I'm used to left to right. I'm used to left to right. And so I'm always looking for the next page, but it works in reverse here. So I apologize for the short delay. Okay. So what we're going to do, and when we come to the last verse, since we're concluding the book of Bamidbar, the last verse, we all rise and we say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nit chazeh. We go from strength to strength. We'll chant it, it'll be clear. Let's see, where's the,
What's over there? He's looking for the blessing.
Would anyone like to come and lead this, the blessings over the Torah? Anyone? Yeah, please. But everyone is going to join in. Okay.
It's okay.
Bless Adonai and Barak.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Adonai.
Go ahead.
Together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. B'chol bat yoreshet nachala mimatot b'nei Yisrael liechad mimishpachat mata avirati el isha leman Yeshuv b'nei Yisrael ish nachala avatav Veloti sov nachala mimata lemata acher ki ish benachalato yidbeku matot b'nei Yisrael kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe kein asu benot tzlafchad vatiyena maklat tirtzah v'chogla umilka v'noa benot tzlafchad livnei dodechen lanashim mimishpachot b'nei Menashe ben Yosef hayu lanashim v'tehi nachalatan al mata mishpachat avichem.
Please rise.
Eila hamitzvot v'hamishpatim asher tziva Adonai b'yad Moshe el b'nei Yisrael b'arvot Moab al Yarden Yerecho chazak chazak v'nikazeh. You may be seated.
You know.
Okay, Baruch
atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. In the interest of time, we're going to just wrap the Torah very quickly, and then we'll put the Torah back. And to justify the quickness, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that the study of Torah is equal to all the other mitzvahs that are in the Torah, and that's what we're trying to get to. Would a new person like to come and to open the ark, please? We're going to continue now with the Eitz Chaim. Please rise. Page 374 as the Torah is returned to the ark.
375.
Excuse me, page 374. Is it 375? You may be seated. Our service continues now with the Misha Berach prayer on page 370. We'll chant the first two verses as we have done. Excuse me, page 371 in the middle of the page. Page 371, and we'll stop. And if you know someone who is in need of spiritual or physical healing, during that pause, please say their name either out loud or like to yourself. We'll begin with the people who are on Zoom. We'll ask that they be unmuted for this portion of the service. And then when they're finished, then we'll go around the room and say the names of those who are in need of spiritual and physical healing. Page 371.
We share our day before May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
First, the people on Zoom. Do we have any?
We do, but we don't have any.
Good. Here, please. Please.
Paul Bradley.
Thank you.
Jennifer Sundberg and Jim Lachino.
Thank you.
Teresa Rice Harrington and Deanna Broussard.
Barbara Cusin and the families of the victims. So sad.
Dr. John Johnson.
Annie Grossman and Judy Stein and Sally Cohen.
Callie Broussard.
We share bless those in need of healing, with the food the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit,
And let us say, Amen. Please rise for the Olenu on page 586. May be seated. This week, we observed the yahrzeit of Mr. Terry Barkin and Mr. Mark Miller. Is there anyone observing a yahrzeit or saying Kaddish for someone at this time that they wish to remember? Thank you.
Very much, and he does very.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I can. Let's go up.
In solemn testimony to that unbroken faith, which links generations one to another, but all who mourn now rise and join in the recitation of the Kaddish, Kaddish for mourners, those observing yahrzeit, those whose tradition it is to join in its recitation as a community. Page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah v'alma divrach yirutei v'amnich malchutei v'chayecho u'v'yomecho u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman kori v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitala shemei d'kudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata ta'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama l'adamin shemaya B'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mamav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May God, who establisheth peace unto the heavens, grant peace and comfort in the hearts of all who mourn, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. I won't put our president on the spot. I did forget the announcements for sitting in my office. Next time when we have services, I'll make the announcements. I'll have the announcement sheet here as opposed to doing it from like memory. But I do know that this coming Wednesday at 5:30, there is a tour study again. We had a wonderful turnout last time. I hope everybody, those who came and those who have not come, Zoom option is also available. And services once again on a Friday evening at 6:15. Please note that beginning in August, in order to give everybody an opportunity to get access to a Mishkan Tefillah, we will begin using on Friday night the Mishkan Tefillah as opposed to the booklets which were wonderfully put together and were so crucial to the continuation of services during the pandemic. And once again, we want to thank the religious committee for putting those wonderful books together. At some point, they may once again become useful, but they will be a treasured part of the archives, a symbol of the spirit of our temple. Are there any other announcements before we conclude the service?
Next Saturday night.
Oh, yes. Is it next Saturday? Yeah, yes, right. Next Saturday night will be a special service. It will be a Tisha B'Av service. There will be select readings from the Book of Lamentations, as well as other significant readings and prayers, as well as music. So that will begin at 7 o'clock in the evening, next Saturday evening. And of course, everyone is welcome. And there will be a Zoom option available, I believe. Thank you. Following services, there will be a wonderful little Kiddush luncheon. Secretly, there's some schnapps, even though we don't have a liquor license. I won't say the member that brought him, but I'm certainly very happy that he did so. So for those that want to partake a little bit, be sure to express thanks particularly to Priscilla and Maggie, who spent a good part of the morning yesterday putting together, consistent with the guidelines of COVID, a little bit of a light snack/lunch together. I can't help but do this. I've been dying to do this. Yeah, so I'm going to do it. I don't care, even though we're going to do Adon Olam on page 625, but to a melody that maybe you might be familiar with. We'll see. But you can join in at any time. My old congregation back at Dartmouth, they got to a point where they knew it so well that they were harmonizing. So I'm hoping that we'll get to that stage. Or that the way I have to I just have to say that I am overwhelmed by the level of participation, by the number of people who came, and by the level of participation. You know, when you're up here and you hear voices and you hear people praying, it really is inspiring. And I don't care how many services I've led. Every time I hear it, it is. And you can see Molly is nodding her head. Wow, Molly has a wonderful voice. I think when we hear from it, it inspires the people up here. So thank you so much. It's just, as they say, I'm blown away. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra V'yet Nasa V'chetzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra V'acharei Kirlot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora Hu Haya Vehu Hoveh Hu Yeh B'tifara Hu Echad V'Ein Sheni Ham Shelo Le'achbira B'li Reishit B'li Tachlis B'lo Ha'oz V'Ha'misra V'hu Eli V'chai Go'ali V'tzuchem Li B'Yitzara Hu Nisi Umanosli V'nat Kosi B'yom Ekra Biyado Afki B'chi B'yeti Shan V'yahira V'im'chi Geviyati Adonai V'lo Ira Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra V'yet Nasa V'chetzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Shabbat Shalom.